here is my mind map for Year 7 Chemistry. Year 7 Chemistry is all about matter. Matter can be found in two forms. It can be found either in a pure form, which means there is only one type of particle, and the components are chemically bonded together. The pure form can be elemental, which means it only has one type of atom, or a compound where there are two different types of atom. So pure carbon dioxide would be an example of the compound. Then we have mixtures, which are made of two or more different types of particles. The particles are physically bound together. They are not chemically bound together. The particles can be separated physically, and when they are separated physically, they retain their original properties. Now, there are many different types of mixtures, which we'll look at down here. There are solutions, there are colloids, there are suspensions. A solution is transparent, which means light can shine through it. In a solution, a solute is dissolved in a solvent. It is homogeneous, which means that the solute is evenly spread throughout the solvent. There is solubility, which defines how easily a solute dissolves in a solvent. Concentration is the ratio of the solute to the solvent. A dilute solution has a low amount of solute and a high amount of solvent. A concentrated solution has a high amount of solute with a low amount of solvent. Saturated means that the maximum amount of solute is dissolved in some solvent. In a supersaturated solution, we have started with a saturated solution, but with heating and stirring, we've been able to add more solute. Insoluble means that the solute cannot dissolve in the solvent. With a colloid, we have medium-sized particles dispersed within the medium, but the colloid is heterogeneous, which means the particles are not evenly spaced throughout the medium, even though it may look like it is. There are 4 different types of colloid, being an emulsion, a foam, a gel, and a sol. In an emulsion, it's a liquid inside a liquid. It requires an emulsifier. The emulsifier allows the two insoluble liquids to mix together. A foam is a gas in a liquid. A gel is a liquid in a solid, and a sol is a solid in a liquid. In a suspension, we've got large insoluble particles dispersed within the medium. Again, it's heterogeneous because the particles are not evenly spaced, and with time, the particles will settle on the bottom of the beaker. Up here, we've got a lovely table that explains the difference between a pure substance and a mixture, and the difference between homogeneous and heterogeneous. Then we get on to separating substances. We can separate soluble substances and we can separate insoluble substances. When separating soluble substances, the first one we look at is chromatography. Chromatography works upon the basis of solubility. The solutes are dissolved in a solvent. The solvent rises up the filter paper, and the solutes are carried along with the solvent as it rises up the filter paper. The more soluble a substance, the further it will travel. Next, we have distillation. Distillation separates two liquids based upon their boiling points. That is, when they evaporate. The solution is heated to reach the boiling point, and the solution with the lowest boiling point evaporates first. The vapor rises up the column to the condenser. The condenser is cooled down by water, and then the vapor condenses into a liquid, and then the pure distillate is collected. Evaporation is based upon boiling points as well. The solute is dissolved in a solvent. The solvent has a lower boiling point than the solute. Therefore, the solvent evaporates before the solute, leaving behind the solute, which then crystallizes. Next, we have desalination. Now, desalination is the way we remove salt from salt water. First, we can use heat, which is pretty much the evaporation method, where the water evaporates, leaving behind the salt. Then the pure water is collected by using condensation. The more modern way for desalination is by using a membrane and the process of reverse osmosis. Salt water is taken from the ocean, put under pressure, and then pushed through a pipe that is covered in a membrane, and the membrane allows water through but not salt, and therefore a hypersaline solution is left behind and pumped back out to sea. When we're going to separate insoluble substances, we can use gravity, magnetism, centrifugation, filtering, sieving, decanting, and flocculation. Gravity just uses gravity, and therefore the heavier objects sink to the bottom. Magnetism works upon the principle of magnetism, of course. Magnetism uses a magnet to attract magnetic elements, and the only magnetic elements are iron, nickel, and cobalt. In centrifugation, a test tube is tilted at a 45-degree angle and then spun, and the spinning exerts centrifugal force, and the heavier objects move to the bottom. In filtering, a mixture is passed through filter paper. The filter paper has tiny pores in it. Anything that is small enough will pass through the filter paper to become filtrate. Anything that is not small enough to move through the filter paper will be left behind and is called residue. Sieving is exactly like filtering, except the pores are a lot bigger and we can separate rocks from sand this way. Decanting is the separation of a residue from a liquid. By tilting the beaker, the liquid runs down the glass rod to leave behind the residue, but this is not terribly efficient. The last way is flocculation. The flocculant is positive and sticks to the dirt that is negative. Floc is formed when clumps of dirt react and bind to the flocculant. The floc can either sink or be scooped off the top, and it's this floc that can later be turned into sludge cake. And then we get to water. With water, we go through the phases, which are solid, liquid, and gas. If we start with solid ice, it then melts to become liquid water, which then evaporates to become water vapor. Now, water vapor can condense back into liquid water, and liquid water can undergo freezing to become solid ice again. When we're talking about water in the environment, there are several types. First of all, we have groundwater, which is water under the ground, amazingly, and most of it is found in aquifers, and aquifers are porous rock that store water underground. When water is fit for human consumption, we call it potable. When we use water at home and we can still use it out in the garden, we call it grey water. Grey water comes from the laundry and showers and baths, etc. It has nothing else really in it but water and maybe a little bit of soap. But then we have black water, which is from the toilet or kitchen sink. Down the bottom here, I've got several ways for separating substances. We've got chromatography, we've got distillation, we've got evaporating, we've got filtration, we've got evaporating with condensing at the top, we've got decanting, and then down the bottom here in the left-hand corner, I've got a little picture about flocculation. Thank you for paying attention. Goodbye.